The March 18th Finance Committee meeting will come to order. First order of business is establishing a quorum. Arlen Gould,
Aye.
Stacy Katz,
Yes.
Bill Pritzker, me. I'm here. We have a quorum. The first order of business after that is for any public comments. Any public comments would be limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there, Mike? Do we have anybody in the server in the waiting room?
There are no public comments.
Tara, anything on your end?
No public comment here.
Very good. We shall proceed with our meeting then. And Michael, I understand we've got one topic and you have some guests that are with us as well. A guest.
Yes, this is a continuation of our discussion from the November Finance Committee meeting where we brought a preliminary topic of a partnership, public-private partnership with Nicholas and Associates on the land next door, where we'd be looking at potentially a building that would house wraparound services that would aid our community and students, in addition to a space for some of the administrative offices in light of the fact that our current building is at capacity and has a number of issues, mostly the ADA compliance issue, in trying to get that up to code in order to make this a fully accessible building, in addition to a more functional space based upon the layout. As we talked about in November, this opportunity exists because our current construction managers are developing the property next door under their private equity group Wingspan Development, and that there is space for commercial and retail and office space up front. And there are residential row homes in the back, about 55 total. In talking with them, based upon the fact that we did realize a need that is growing, we talked about a parcel of land that we would go ahead and potentially, if possible, take ownership of if the board saw it under either a lease to own option or a option where we would go ahead and own it and then pay it off over an installment period. And we talked to the board about gauging a level of interest amongst our community partners to bring back to you for a decision or a discussion towards a decision in the end. Back after the November meeting, I reached out to Hands on Suburban Chicago, NWSRA, YWCA, and Omni Health Services, all current partners of the district in one way or another, either providing services, programs for families, and other mechanisms by which they are helping our community. We also, at that point, got names of Medicaid doctors, dentists, and eye doctors to see what level of interest there could be, because as you know, housing services like this in one place would be a huge benefit to our families, who oftentimes have problems either locating services or making it to those. And those doctor, physician type services are a big plus because students need physicals, dental exams, eye exams, and that's something that we could really provide a benefit for with the community if we had this type of partnership. And the only way that we would look at this type of project is if we had that type of community partnership, because on our own, we don't need a 3-story building. Together, this is something that could benefit the community and the district jointly for many years going forward. So we did hold meetings, Dr. Connolly, myself, and Kim Klein, the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services and Student Safety, held meetings with those organizations to gauge interest. Dr. Connolly, Kim, and myself were very pleased with the outreach from those organizations and the ideas for that building, and truthfully, commitments towards use in that building for the purpose of helping our students, our families, and going beyond that, using that space on the second floor that would be joint meeting rooms, big presentation rooms, to be able to do parent universities, to be able to do job fairs, to be able to do all sorts of items that this area is in need of, a one central location type of area. So at that point, we went ahead and talked then with Tammy Beckwith-Shalmo, who's here tonight. You have her presentation in the board packet. We talked with Eris Dalianis, who is from Franzik. I think they're Franzik just now, not Franzik Radelet or Franzik Sullivan anymore. He is our property tax and construction counsel. We use him for property tax appeals, looking at construction contracts to see what options we had legally. And we also talked with Nick Cavalier, our auditor, about the process, those three jointly about the process, about what our fund balances look like, about the different options for financing the project. And that's how we arrived here at this tonight. We've also talked with Nicholas a little bit further about what the footprint is, and they've given us a range of footprints. They gave us the 10,000 square foot per floor, 30,000 square foot building. And they gave us one that, based upon need, they said you could grow to this, gave us a more premium spot in the lot. So it's closer to the front of Dundee Road there. And that would be the 14,000 square foot per floor option, which allows for more physician related space. But yet the design is open. It's ours to go ahead and work with them on if we choose to go down this path. That path all in is about $15 million. As you see from the presentation on the finance, we could go ahead and fund this through a couple of different mechanisms. Tammy's more than capable to speak to it. And then we have options for the lease or lease purchase of this. And those can be anywhere from a regular lease that would go anywhere from 0 to 99 years. We would think our max would be 15 years to finance that over. We could do another option that is a 10-year lease. And we could issue debt certificates, which do not hit taxpayers. This would not be anything that would increase local property taxes a cent. This would all come from fund balance that has been amassed over the last number of years through the actions of the board and good financial stewardship. And by pricing it out over 10 to 15 years, that makes it so that we're not impacting our fund balance immediately in a way that it negatively impacts the district. It allows us to pay it off over that time and really makes this opportunity a much easier opportunity to push forward on and make sure we don't impact the education program, the long-range plan of the district, or any of the other goals and vision that we have moving forward. So this is the time to discuss and see how we want to proceed, if any, with going towards the full board with it. And hopefully we'll have a good discussion here, because I think this is a really good opportunity for the community first and the district second.
One of the things I noticed for this meeting is that you've included the third option, which is a heavy renovation of our current facility.
Correct.
And that's together with an addition, it looks like.
In order to make this space truly ADA compliant and fully usable for the number of staff that we have here, that's the option in discussing with Nicholas that is the best option for doing that. And as you can see, it carries with it a very heavy price tag.
Yeah.
That there still is aging building hardware and structure and HVAC systems that go along with that make that a doable option, but we could weigh that as a consideration versus constructing new and what goes along with that.
Well, logistics of trying to renovate this while you're still using it would seem to be pretty difficult as well. Not
Yes.
insurmountable, but difficult.
Well, and I believe the last time this building was renovated, there was a period of, I don't know how many months, but there was a period of months when people did relocate to an offsite temporary office space.
Yeah, that is true.
Which would add a cost to that as well.
Exactly. Okay. Questions?
Oh,
Comments?
go ahead. I'm
No, go
sorry.
ahead. I
No,
have a
Mine
question.
was a simple first question was square footage that you vision at the new facility versus here. Is there a number that you've got in mind?
Well, this building is about 30,000 square feet as it stands now. So that would be comparable next door if we went on the low end. The larger building, the 42,000 square feet, obviously gives us a little bit more room to breathe. The goal is to bring at least the superintendent's office, HR and finance and operations over there, leaving in place here, at least in the existing back half of the building, the tech side and the operations and the operations warehouse. And then that leaves space that is much needed for the tech team to spread out. They have to also have a space for, as we do more and more projects. for storage for when their deliveries come in and as they set up the devices to go out. We really don't have, other than their lab, an area to have kind of a staging area. And right now we have competing interests in the maintenance warehouse between the shield testing, the Chromebooks that came in, all of the stuff that's in the warehouse currently and other orders for the end of the year. And then it also provides that opportunity for the meeting space and, tertiary offices for curriculum, student services, who the vision would be that they're going to be working closely together on their issues. So whether it's in this space or Hawthorne, as some of them are there now, it really provides us the ability to spread out and still have professional development space in this room and still have offices that people can use when they need to meet together.
Now, from a design perspective, we are not far, we're in the concept phase.
Right,
And
right.
so as we actually go and design, it really then comes down to, would we have sufficient space within that, that third floor of a new building to include teaching and learning and student services? But keep in mind, we have a large amount of space on the second floor of Hawthorne that is not active classroom space. And so that is an area that we would certainly be considering for placing our teaching and learning and student service departments. And there's a lot of options there in terms of their ability to have a nice, good amount of space where they can spread out, they can do their kind of collaborative work and but those are all things that we would still need to really plan out. I would, not to contradict what Michael was saying, but I do not think we would keep teaching and learning and student services in this space. This is, I think, would be needed for tech operations and additional storage. I don't think we would shoehorn anybody else in here.
Well, you'd have to invest a lot to make this accessible as well.
Correct.
Would you not?
Correct,
If you used it for anything other than stuff like that.
correct.
Stacy, you had some comments, questions?
Are you there?
Go ahead.
Okay, yes, I do have some questions. Let's see where to begin. So if we decided to go with the new building, either the 30,000 or the 46,000 square foot footprint, you indicated this building would still be used partially. At least the front part would.
So the back half for sure would be used. Dr. Connor and I have spoke about would we do for the front half, and we have a few different ideas. If you've been through the front half, and I'm sure you have, that is the least accessible spot or part of this entire building. The back half is actually fairly accessible. It has the lift. Front half has basically 3 levels or 2 levels that are really chopped up, small doorways. So that is the space that we've talked about. Do we keep that for any purpose, or do we turn that into a outdoor learning facility for London? Do we turn that into something
Not just
much
London.
more usable to the district?
But
Or
those
green
costs
space.
would be in excess of the 11 plus or the 15 plus million quote
Right.
that we have. Do we have an idea of what that will be?
To tear down the front and just so leave the back half and tear down the front.
Right.
We don't have an exact cost on that right now. It's something that we figure is not an immediate activity. But it's something that we can secure. They thought that would be probably obviously a much lighter cost, somewhere in the area of $1 million if we're just tearing it down and doing some basic work. Or it could be less, could be more. It depends on the design. And since we haven't gone, they didn't want to try and put numbers to that yet. So, but it is something that we have as a goal, and we can definitely shore up some numbers on that.
And if I could just jump in here in terms of vision, that just to expand a little bit, what I would like to see if we were going to do this would be to take that front half of the building down and create a green learning space, not just for London, but for the entire district. I think there's an opportunity there to design an active, passive learning space that would include our, just for instance, some those spiral windmills, a solar array, different types of STEM kind of educational environments, community garden, if we wanted to start to do some agriculture type things. And also as a central location, is a place that we can shuttle kids to from around the district to participate in some science-based learning. Again, it's a bit of a dream, but I think it would be a good use of that space. So.
The potential first half, potential first half that you're talking or thinking or potentially removing ends where? At the beginning of this space here?
That,
Or
I
is
think
it
that would
two-
be the thought, would be where they separate from the back half of the building, come up the stairs for door 2.
Right.
Back would stay, and then towards the superintendent's office and curriculum is what would come down.
So on that side.
Yeah,
of
so
the
that
wall.
brick
Yes.
wall on the other side of the
Just wanted to
stairwell.
make sure what was included in
Yeah.
that removal, whether it was this room or not.
The very inaccessible part would be the part we would.
Stacy, you had others?
Yes, so the, the vision, I don't quite think I grasp yet. So if we move to the new space and we have these services there, what does that look like? And by that, I mean, are they leasing out their own space? Or are they like rotating in? We're gonna have, will we have a dentist that's going to move their practice into that building and pay rent? Or they get it Tuesday, the eye doctor gets it Wednesday, and that's we own that space and we're paying on that space.
Right, so there's a combination of ways that this could work out. If we have some community agencies that needed some more permanent office space or satellite office space, that would be part of the space that they would be able to use. I think from our conversations, what is, I think, the more likely is that it would be programming space. And so it would be as you said, a rotation of different agencies coming in, utilizing the different parts of the building. So we would have individual therapy rooms that were set up. And so if you have Omni coming in doing, counseling services, they would be using those spaces. To your question about the medical providers, I don't think we envision anybody moving their practice into it. It's more of on a satellite basis. They're coming in and they're utilizing that space. And so I don't know that it would necessarily be, particularly on the medical side, a space that would be used every day in that way. But it's space that we would have. So there's a lot of versatility. I think in the design that would be reflected. And I think that from the revenue perspective, I think that there's some potential property tax implications on
Right.
terms of the leasing piece that we can get into. But I think where we get the benefit from is the in-kind services. Is that the services that we can provide for our community while maintaining that building. I think that there are some other things that we need to explore. I think, for instance, I believe the Wheeling Food Pantry is always kind of looking for a place to call home. I think there are different types of things even that we haven't explored yet that over time could become part of this. And I think that it changes over time, right? Depending on the needs of the community at the time. So I see it as evolving more as active programming space as opposed to a lot of standalone office spaces,
Okay.
which I think makes it a little bit easier to maintain the versatile kind of use of the building too.
So I have a basic 101 question on debt certificates. I read here and you just reiterated that this isn't going to be funded by the taxpayers, that will be taken from the fund balances, but aren't the funds
So,
comprised of
Yes.
taxes previously collected?
so it's taxes previously collected, it's state revenue and it's federal revenue. And so we identify what our evidence-based funding and other categoricals that are non-tax based are. And that's how we identify the funding source. And so with the surpluses that have been generated over the last number of years, those are easily identified as the state revenue versus the local revenue. And that's how we identify for the purpose of issuing those debt certificates. But that's a great question, because I know we want to make sure that everyone knows it is not going to impact local property taxes whatsoever.
So I do kind of maybe push back on that a little bit. I think that if we obviously don't spend the money, And we'd leave this building as is, and we put a couple Band-Aids on it, right? We obviously aren't going to need the money in the debt. So there's a potential to not tax people as much in the future if we don't do these, we won't be taxing them more as a result of this, but is there a potential that we wouldn't be asking for as much money
Well,
in the years to come?
what we have typically asked for is not anything more than what the statute allows. We take the consumer price increase that we get, the consumer price index increase each year. And then any new property that comes on the rolls. We have not, other than the referendum, the referendum is the only time in the last number of years that the district's gone out and asked for more money through property taxes. So we could ask for less, but in the times that we're in now with the uncertain funding of the state of Illinois, I think levying for anything less than what we get under PTEL is not something that we want to pursue unless we had a very vibrant discussion about what we wanted fund balances to look like.
Well, and to add to that, it would be more of a situation to remember that if you don't maximize your levy, you lose access to those dollars in the future.
Didn't we have that?
Right.
That's what happened.
so-
back in the 90s.
Yeah.
In essence,
Or
the
2000.
unless that law changes, which we'll see. I mean, that is some level of conversation that we had, last year and the year before. And when talking about, because districts get criticized for maxing out the levy, and it's, well, then fix it. Like,
Right.
make it so that we can recapture, a 3-year recapture or whatever the case may be. Those things did not get off the ground in Springfield. So, at least for the foreseeable future, our recommendation would be that we continue to maximize the levy. If we got to a point in which we wanted to evaluate doing some kind of abatement, which is some districts are doing, that would be a give back, but it doesn't necessarily, it's in arrears. It doesn't necessarily lower the property tax, levy that we would be making on a year-to-year basis. So to your point, there's a lot of things that go into, whether or not our tax liability for our residents would drop. Were we not to move in this direction, that could be something that would contribute to it. But as we're also looking at just the normal everyday operational expenses that go up, would it be negligible? So I don't know. Those are all questions that I don't know that we would really know for sure until we were able to maybe do a little bit more specific predicting.
And sorry, I did have questions, but I do have a question on the note in here that in like a risk factor that was outlined, which essentially was, so Wingspan's gonna own this building?
So there's
and the
two
bank's gonna
options.
Be the leasor?
So there's two options. We could, through a private public partnership, lease the building from them, and then once it's paid off, we take ownership. The other option is that we buy it, still using debt certificates, but at least we are the owner of the building outright, and then we pay it off, and it's ours regardless, but we do owe money to somebody who has lent us that money off the debt certificates, but that way we're paying it over a 10 to 15-year period rather than paying it off immediately. So those are the two options. And as Dr. Connolly said, if we do it with Wingspan as the owner, us as the lessee, then, and a bank would likely be the lessor in that case, there are potential tax implications based upon them being a private group that owns. It isn't a TIF, so we would likely talk with Wheeling about that to ask what options we had, because really we're just paying ourselves to a certain extent if there's property taxes paid on it, because they're going to come to us. So we would look at, is there a way to get some sort of revenue sharing agreement where we would reduce our share to pay those taxes so that it came off? Is there a way to make that tax exempt? If we were to buy it, obviously that would carve out and probably even come out of the TIF. So yeah, there's some implications depending on which option we choose. Our auditors, and I think Tammy to a certain extent, believe that the purchase option may actually save us money in the long run. And that would be fine. You know, we're open to either option because it still operates the same overall using the debt certificates.
I'll take a break.
You've done good. So two things. One, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with us being a leasing company, which sounds like we would be if we own the building and trying to fill all those spaces.
The thought
and
would
if-
be, we're not looking to lease to anybody. What we're looking at is getting in-kind services back to the district.
Oh.
And that way, we're not a landlord, we're not
Right.
charging rent. So I think we can probably assuage those fears right now by saying that is not the type of agreement we're looking at.
And that is an evolution from what we had, originally
Right.
talked about in November. So that is true. But as we started to really look into it more, again, the concept of office space wasn't necessarily something that these agencies were saying that they absolutely needed. What they needed was programming space. What they needed was the ability to have things happening in the building with families and so it wasn't. So from that perspective, we would be concluding agreements, not unlike our intergovernmental agreements, where there's services being provided for the ability to utilize the space.
And
So
no cost.
that would be enumerated.
And that, the in-kind is versus any cost to us.
Right.
So I can't hear you, please.
Versus a cost to us, the actual outlaying of dollars to Omni or to whomever it is, they would be using the space.
Right.
So we wouldn't be paying out that much in expenses
Right.
as opposed to taking in lease dollars.
In the conversations that we had were with 4 organizations that it was overwhelmingly supportive. We have a list of 15 to 20 other organizations from Wheeling itself that was provided who are looking for the same type of opportunities in the area. So we're very confident that we have no problem filling that space, whether it's on a rotational basis or on a semi-permanent basis. And then on top of it, to have the Medicaid treatment facilities so that they could do their physicals, their dental exams, their eye exams, really does turn into something that we do not fear taking on to go ahead and manage that rotation.
Is there a concern with exposing us to liabilities for services that our community members feel that are negligent or something because we have a semi-close relationship with these vendors as opposed to here's your space and you're going to pay us,
In talking with council, we don't see, because that was one of the questions I asked Eris and they ran it through Franzik. We don't see that as something that, because we're not managing it, we would obviously have an arm's length transaction where we would be protected. We would get certificates of insurance. We still have a tort immunity protection depending on the types of services they're providing. So I don't have any concern about the liability in that regard.
From a cost per square foot, it seems like it's pretty straightforward that the 3rd floor, the 45 or 42,000 square foot option is the most cost effective for what we're looking at. In addition to being able to provide the type of community services that our community could certainly use. I think it opens up a whole window of relationships and partnerships for the district that serves to serve this community, communities, obviously. So, question.
So if there's medical type rooms, are we going to be equipping those rooms or would the person or the people who are using it be spending the money to equip those kinds of rooms? Or is
Well,
that-
it depends on what they need, right? So as we would be designing the space, we'd be designing it so that there was the proper kind of ventilation, plumbing access, those types of things. In terms of actually, having, an exam chair or something like that in there, we can't answer that question right now.
Right.
It really all depends on kind of exactly what, kind of partnerships we would create. But I think it's also something that, particularly for these types of things, either through billing Medicaid, through, other types of health, foundation grants, things of that nature. There's a lot of opportunities to be reaching out for financial partnerships to defray or cover the costs of those types of startup things. So I would say if we ended up footing the bill for it, we weren't trying very hard, because, there's a lot of ways to go. Perhaps Wheeling Township, whatever the case may be. So there's options that we would really want to pursue as we continue to build out the design.
And I can tell you, in my former life, I negotiated and reviewed a lot of contracts with organizations who came in and brought their own dental chair to a building in the district and have done that with eye exams. So whether it's like Dr. Connolly said, if we end up footing the bill, we haven't tried hard enough to make that work.
Okay. Have we talked to Northwest Community, just out of curiosity?
Not yet.
Not yet.
The other question, so from a cash basis, what do we anticipate this would deplete our fund balances by to put the key in the door?
In the presentation, it
I didn't
speaks to
see it.
some numbers. And this is just based off of this year's fund balance, where we are at 58.3% of all expenditures, 65.28% of operating expenditures is our fund balance. We look at it, and if nothing changed, if we did the $10 million facility, general fund balance would be a little over 47%, and operating expenditure fund balance would be 55%. So we really have not, and that's nothing changing. That's us running the same type of program. We will obviously will do a 5-year projection when we come closer, if that's the board's desire, to show what that looks like. But I feel comfortable with these numbers. I know Tammy feels comfortable with these numbers. Nick looked at them as well as our auditor, and everybody is coalesced around this being a fair assumption based upon where we're at and where we see things headed in the future.
I think the next step would be for this committee to decide that we want the full board to take this under consideration at next month's meeting. Or whether or not there isn't support from the committee, or we not recommend that the full board at least consider that possibility. So where do we stand? Is there enough here to say, yes, we think the full board needs to take a look and consider this, or not? Stacy?
One real quick question.
Sure.
Why would we only contribute 10 million if the cost is roughly 15 plus?
That was the first of the options.
Okay.
So that's, yeah, I mean, and then I think there
Whatever
was-
we decide. we
yeah,
would
for
pay.
every $1 million, there's a reduction by 1%. So I'm sorry, that was the second line in there. I forgot to add that. And again, we could be between 10 and 15. I think that's why we provided the range, was worst case and best. And so whether it's 12,000 square feet or whatever it may be, because like Dr. Connolly said, once we get into the design, we'll really have a better idea. That first design was based off of a District 57 template. Second design was based off of some of the conversations we had, and they are more than happy to go anywhere in between them.
Okay.
No, I mean, my vote would be to have all of our colleagues take a look at this and ask questions and bring it to them. I think I said it before, it's like, does it have to happen during a pandemic? But, you can't always pick your time. And there's obviously a need here, and we've got to address it somehow. So I think it would be good to have everybody voice their thoughts on it.
Okay, Stacy, Arlen?
Yeah, I would agree with it. I still have concerns. The magnitude of the project, that having come off of our years of budget cutting and trying to strengthen our finances. And also we're beginning to look at, additional educational needs and the needs for additional operating expenses. And so given the two, I'm concerned that we put ourselves in a box. And if there's another downturn, it concerns me, but I would agree that let's have the rest of the board input the concept.
Yeah, we've certainly been through the budgetary wars over the decades that we've been here. However, we did that with the anticipation that hopefully at some point in time, we'd be able to allocate funds for things that were exciting, that were big, that made a difference. That more than just a few shekels. And I think this project is something that presents itself just as such. So, Mike, I think we've agreed to move this forward for a full board discussion.
What would be very helpful is between now and obviously our next board meeting isn't until April 29th. So we've got quite a bit of time, is every question that this committee has, if you could get them to Michael, because obviously there is a lot that it still needs to be discussed, thought about. This is by no means an easy decision to make. So I think as comprehensive of a presentation that we can form for the full board on the 29th would be better served by having those critical questions in advance that we can incorporate into the work. So, as you have one of those, 4 a.m. moments, if you could, just make sure that you, get those questions to Michael so that we can really keep at refining this and getting the answers together.
Yes, any of those 4 a.m. light bulb moments, do not call me. You may email or text and I'll catch the next day. Do not call me. So at 6:52, the Finance Committee is adjourned. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everybody.
Tammy, thank you
Thank
for
you,
hanging
Michael.
in there.
Of course, good to see everyone and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.